welcome to Friday Live. This is our I think it's our 50th. I'm not positive on the number, but it's about that anyway. We'll have to get some actual metrics. We actually started Friday Live. We were one of the very first virtual ones just as COVID started up. And then we sort of kept it going. So it's nice to see everybody come out today. Hopefully we got something of value and you can pick up something to share. This month we have our regular segments, UX Corner. We're going to just quick touch base on Vienna Calling. I want to tell you a little bit about that conference. It's a great opportunity to explore and travel as well as grow your FileMaker skills. One of our team, Linxue, is going to be showing a touch and hold type example. I want to talk a little bit about embedding widgets and how you can go about doing some of those. Those are like these things like this little icon down in the corner, and we have some examples for that as well. We also want to talk about our streaming APIs. We have 3 APIs now that can be used for AI streaming. One of them is going to be deprecated, and the other two, and I'll talk about the differences, and we'll walk through the docs, and we'll show some examples of that. If you have any questions, any questions at all, by all means, please do feel free to jump right in. We try to make these things interactive. It's not a total show. So we had a number of conferences coming up over the past, over the next year. Vienna Calling, we just went by. Build, Grow, Learn. If you're interested in doing or interested in developing your business, right? This is not really a FileMaker conference. It's a business growth conference for FileMaker developers and other people who are in similar type of industries, consultancies and such. We got a ton of value out of it. We were actually the first to buy tickets for this year as well. And I really, really recommend going to that. It's hosted in Greenville, South Carolina by the Scarpetta Group, Joe Scarpetta, as well as Kalos Consulting. And they did a great job, with Beyond the Chaos, the 3 of them sort of teamed up, but I think it's only 2 this year. Did a great job of promoting that and organizing that. They had some really excellent speakers. If you're interested in things like learning about exit plans, about selling your business, that type of stuff, that's really what this is geared towards. Anybody going to Naples FileMaker Week at all? Traveling to Italy? It's a good opportunity. Right, that's coming up in October. They've run a few of these in the past. They had Rome FileMaker Week last year and the year before. I think they've run 2 or 3 of those. I went to the one last year; it was really good. And technical content, I would say it's not bad. If you want just pure technical stuff, right? Pure technical stuff. Vienna Calling, which is the continuation of .fmp, is probably the highest level of technical content that you'll see in FileMaker conferences, to my knowledge. And maybe the old Pause on Air were sort of really technical oriented as well. Reconnect in Australia, that's going to be in Melbourne this year, and that's coming up in October as well. So if you do take part in any of these, let us know, because we go to some of these events and it'd be great to connect. I want to take a couple seconds to welcome Silas. Silas is actually in our group. He's joining us. He's our new sort of intern slash, I don't know if you call it intern, summer student.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Silas, you can feel free to introduce yourself if you like.
All right. So yeah, my name is Silas. I'm a 20-year-old student from the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, and a friend of Eduardo's, and I'm joining as an intern for the summer, and I'm really excited to contribute to this great team here and learn lots.
Awesome. Silas is working on some automations. You'll see some of the fruits of his labor over the next probably the next few weeks or so. Basically connecting some of our knowledge repositories to Slack and to our AI assistant and into our forum. So basically the integration of some of that stuff is the main projects he's working on right now. And then maybe in a few weeks, it'll change a little bit. So welcome to the team. I'm going to pass it over to Hassan. I don't think you have a ton of updates, but you mentioned you had a few things.
Yeah, not a ton of updates, but I'll mention some things coming up. Lately, the team has been focusing on documentation and getting out resources. So in the coming weeks, you'll see something called BF Academy coming out. And we're gonna have a bunch of videos over there on getting started in specific topics. If anyone has any suggestions for videos they'd like to see, these are usually between like 2 to 10 minutes, shorter videos on how to do something. This can also be FileMaker related or BetterForms related. Please feel free to let us know.
I just realized that I did not have the I had my free screen frozen the whole time there. So just to recap quickly, these are the events that I was talking about, and there's Silas there as well. All right, I'm going to pass things over to Pearson, who's our UX designer.
Thanks, Charles. And hello, everybody. Excited for another UX Corner and another Friday Live. Hope everybody's been surviving this week. I don't know about where everybody else is located, but at least Southern Ontario and I think the general area around us has been going through a pretty significant heat wave at the start of this week. But luckily now it's oddly enough, I'm happy that it's overcast and kind of coolish because it's been it's been pretty brutal working from home in front of a computer all day, and the sun is just cooking me alive out here. But yeah, I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and today I'll be talking about a usability heuristic. This one is about matching between systems and the real world. So, if you've been to some other Friday Lives and seen any of these other UX corners, I've been going through a few of these different usability heuristics, and these are kind of general guidelines or, um, I guess, yes, specified tips and tricks in order to make your UX or your software as user-friendly and intuitive as possible. So I've gone through a couple of these before. Today, I'm going to focus on matching between the real world or matching your systems and the real world. Um, and this kind of I'll use an example here, and this is kind of like a really bad bathroom or shower experience. You might be at a hotel. This is not a photo of my own, but this is what it reminded me of, where you might be at a new hotel, could be one of the fancier hotels, and you go into the bathroom maybe after a long day of traveling, and you see an interface that you don't know how to use. Like it just doesn't make any sense. You have a very familiar idea of what this experience should look like, and you walk into this fancy shower and it's not at all what you expected. This has happened to me before where I think this might have been a conference at the company or might have just been for me traveling for something else. But I remember long travel day, get to the hotel, I just want to have a long shower and go to sleep, and they actually had a set of instructions on how to use the shower. I had no idea what all of these knobs did. It was something about like turn this knob this way to change the temperature, but pull this lever to actually uh use this spout versus this spout, and it was just such a hassle. This wasn't replicating the experience that I thought I was going to experience, and so that caused some issues, some frustrations, and just a general not pleasant experience, especially as a first impression at this hotel that I was staying at. But to get more specific about what this heuristic actually means, the definition is that the system should speak the user's language with words, phrases, or concepts familiar to the user rather than system-oriented terms. So you want to follow real-world conventions and make information appear in a natural and logical order. So, oops. In this case, just to wrap this one up, this could be by all accounts an incredible shower experience. Maybe these knobs did have some value that they could offer me, but me as just a general user, I don't really care or have the time to invest in learning all of this. So even if it was a better experience, if I knew everything, I don't know everything. So now this is just causing me more issues, and I don't want to learn in this case. But speaking of the language that we use, we want to speak the user's language and not the developer's language. And so, in the last example, it was a more physical example, but this still applies to literally the copy that we use in our systems. So here we have two of the same messages, or at least the message is the same concept. And one we're speaking in kind of a developer language, and the other we're talking in a general user's language. So here, yeah, the password that you entered was incorrect. We call that a failed authentication. And we could say that, but it sounds very robotic. It doesn't really uh, make the user feel like this is a system made for them. All we have to say is wrong password, please try again. And that language really changes kind of the mood or the general experience of what the user is interacting with. So you could even think about it as if you're at a customer service line or at a kiosk, and if the person said this to you, how would it sound? Would it sound awkward or would it sound natural? And if I went up to a kiosk and I had to give them some kind of authentication, maybe my license or something, my ID, and they just look at me and say authentication failed, then that is a really weird interaction to have with a real person. So that's probably not the language that you want to use in an interface here. Using the user's language and not the developer's language is a great way just to make someone feel more comfortable in your software. And beyond just the language that we're using, the order in which we're displaying information or using particular jargon can be really, it can take people away um, from that interaction, or make them feel less comfortable in your system. So here, this is an example from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So already, if you're on the site as a user trying to complete a certain task, this is not this is already probably a stressful experience that you're going through already. And so if you're on this website and you're trying to get to the information here, just a couple get started or application process, and you're met with these kind of these loud notifications at the top, these kind of whatever these notifications are, it doesn't feel great. Is using certain acronyms that you don't necessarily know what they mean. So if you actually read through this, a lot of people won't read through this. They might just skip this because this isn't the information they're looking for, or not where they're expecting to find it. You don't know what this means, and you have to go learn more. You have to go to an extra page to understand what this notification is and if it even applies to you. And like I said, if you're already in a kind of high stress situation or doing something that you don't want to be doing, the last thing you want to do is add more tasks to your list of chores that you already have to do. So this is just an example of kind of you're not replicating the real language that someone would be used to in these acronyms. You're kind of just throwing them in there and forcing the user to learn what those mean. And also these aren't being displayed in a logical order that you might expect. This these notifications, they should be placed somewhere more relevant to the user if this does apply to them, and not just at the top of the screen where someone could easily just scroll away from it. The next example I want to talk about is skeuomorphism, and this is a design style that really took off, I think, in maybe like the 90s or early 2000s, and has developed and evolved into a different style that we see today. But it's just a design style in which digital elements are mimicking real-world elements or real-world objects using familiar visual cues like textures and shadows and shapes to make these interfaces more intuitive and user-friendly. Um, so we have a lot of examples like this, and we see them all over the interfaces that we use. Sometimes we might not even notice. It just feels so natural to us. So the most obvious example is like the recycling bin, the trash bin. Uh, we all know what that looks like in real life. We all know what this symbol means. It's something that uh, we just understand through our life experiences. And in our systems, something we also just kind of take for granted, you could say, or we don't even think about, is how the recycling bin or the trash bin on our computers, it looks like the trash bin that we see in real life. And this is something that is so familiar to us because it's just so universally understood, and kind of showing the usage of that of it in our system, showing that, yeah, this is a full trash bin. You have things in here versus this is an empty trash bin. You just emptied it, and so there are no files in here. Something really, really easy and simple to understand without having to read anything or dive deeper into trying to understand what this means. And so we also have folders that replicate the real world version of folders. We have icons that replicate or that kind of have a metaphorical meaning behind them. The save button, no one is even touching a floppy disk anymore. Not to call you out, Silas, but I'm not sure if you've ever seen one in real life, you know? But we all know what this button means. We all know this universally means save your progress. The search bar is a magnifying glass. No one's using that in real life to find anything, but we just know what that icon represents. And this last example, replicating a calendar when we're trying to select a date rather than remembering what number representation or what number is the month of August, and you're counting through the calendar months trying to figure out, is it '08 or '09? Just being able to give the user an interface that replicates what a calendar actually looks like makes it so much easier to select a particular date when you're trying to add that information. We can also replicate and mimic real life in other digital interfaces. So while this isn't replicating or matching between a real life uh, kind of real world uh, inference, this is an example of some keyboard shortcuts that are so universally used that they do apply to so many different types of software across the board. So the most obvious ones are, cut, copy, paste. That's the command or control C, X, and V. Those are so universally understood in any kind of software that it would be ridiculous or counterproductive to change what these shortcuts are in your software. So we want to make sure that users have an understanding of your software or of your interface without having to actually go to any kind of um, other resource to find out what this all means or how to perform something. So this is just a way to replicate what users are already familiar with. Uh, this is an example of how color can help people understand what is happening. And so this is replicating traffic lights. Red means risk, danger. Green means safety, happiness, prosperity. And, those are kind of high level definitions or high level meanings that it doesn't always have to be that deep. But in general, we just know green good, red bad, orange probably somewhere in the middle. So I use these, and all sorts of systems use these colors in very simple ways. These status badges or status indicators. So many times I'm just making a green box with a green word inside, and that is a good thing. And when it's red, that means it's a bad thing. And when it's orange, it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm not sure where they got those colors for traffic lights in real life. I'm not sure where that actually comes from. I've heard that red is generally understood universally as bad because that is the color of our blood. And if you see blood, probably not a good situation. Whereas green is the color of nature, and it's a very natural color, very naturally occurring color. So we as people have, through the thousands and thousands of years that we've been around, green generally is a good thing. So that might be where those colors come from, but uh, we're most familiar with the red, orange, red, or sorry, red, green, orange in traffic lights. So if we can replicate that in our interfaces, that's just another way to help communicate with our users and help them understand what they're looking at. And lastly, as a larger kind of umbrella use of mimicking real life is just in the general experiences. So we see that I have some examples here, and this example is missing. So I think I'm just going to go to this slide. But we have messaging, text messages, emails. That's like passing a note to somebody. You're trying to convey a message, you're just sending it directly to them. That's what we're mimicking. On Instagram or Facebook, we are mimicking looking through a photo album. Back in the day, you might spend some time sitting on the couch with your family or a loved one looking through a photo album the same way you might be looking through old memories on someone's Facebook page, or scrolling down through someone's old Instagram posts just to have a laugh. We're replicating those experiences. Same thing with Netflix or any other kind of streaming platform. We are just digitizing the experience of walking into a Blockbuster or a Rogers and just scanning through all the titles on the shelves. It's the same exact experience, but in a way that, or we're trying to replicate that experience because it is so familiar and it's so natural. And this one here is a good one. We're replicating highlighting words in a book with a highlighter, and we can do that digitally almost everywhere. Because that is just something that, uh, probably highlighting in a digital sense might be more used than highlighting in a physical sense nowadays. But either way, it is replicating that real life interaction.
Interesting. The highlighting is actually one thing that you interact with a computer that you do really well, like selecting something. Pearson, are there any other examples of like the empty trash can, full trash can, that like of icons that we would change state on that are sort of similar to that? I guess there's ones that have like checkbox, for example, is an empty box and a box with a check. But I'm just wondering,
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think if there's other examples that are similar to that.
I think the closest would be the empty folder versus the full folder. Um, do you mean like where the icon itself
Yeah, it
changes to
changes. Like,
represent?
can we change states of icons to represent, to show more meaning? What other,
Yeah. There probably, yeah, I'm sure there are other examples. I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. Um,
like the
there's like
chevron?
the
Hmm.
yeah, the chevrons kind of opening and closing. I was gonna say, and I think I can pull up just in as to show. Um, we have like envelopes that could be opened or closed, and I think we use that in one of our new client projects that we're working on for the camp.
Mm.
Um, Showing open envelopes versus a closed envelope. So you might have an envelope like this icon, pretty universal just for like a message or an email or something. And if that email or message is opened, then I've seen uh, a lot of icons change to show the envelope with the
Right.
flap open to represent that this has been opened up, you've read it. So that I think that would be another example of an icon changing to provide new information or to adjust the information that it's presenting.
There's also strike through,
Yeah,
like on the
strike
Zoom
through
button.
on like a mute button on yeah, like
The do
I can
not
think of
enter,
like
yeah.
on a password you have C password or hide password, like that. Yeah, like the microphone. I don't know if it's in here.
Oh, that's an interesting example, because I often wonder what to do for toggles like that, like the C password. Like, which icon do you use to show what? Like, should the icon show the current state or the state if you click it?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
Some of
that
them are
password
obvious
one.
like that, right? But other ones are not obvious, like the open mail, because it's giving an indication versus an action. Whereas the password one is an action. It's a button. It's going to be connected to a button. So it's is at the next state.
mm-hmm. Yeah, are you clicking it to say I want it to be invisible, or are you clicking it to change to the opposite state? So I know that's kind of a I guess maybe that's a more contextual um decision you have to make. I'm trying to remember, what did I show here? Yeah, so I think in general, I'll just say for like a password, I think generally you keep the icon to what is showing right now. So right here,
Okay.
there's a slash through the I because I'm not showing the password. But if I click it, then I could assume that the icon will change, and then I will be able to see what the password is, and it's just a bunch of numbers or something. That's how I would try it. But it might just take some trial and error and see what feels the most natural. And maybe that's where some user testing comes in, just to ask people, what do you think this does, or what do you think this icon is representing right now in this state?
Pearson, as you go back to your traffic light example, I've had clients in the past who have expressed concerns around being colorblind. Have you run into that at all in previous design experiences, and how do you move around something like that?
I haven't been asked about. I mean, I'm very aware that for accessibility reasons, you want to be aware that people might have some maybe color blindness or difficulties with contrast or colors. That's never been brought to my attention as something specific, like, hey, we do have a person who cannot understand this, but it is something that I keep in the back of my mind. So for something like this, that's why colors do help, but the rest of the context around it is what brings it all together. So if I had just green, orange, and red boxes with no text in them, that's an issue, because if someone is colorblind, then they have nothing to go off of other than the color. But by adding more details like text, or maybe you can add icons as well, that helps kind of build a model to help you infer what the meaning is. So if this didn't have text and I had to use something else, I think an icon would be good. So a green box with a check mark, you can understand that without seeing the green.
Mhm.
Maybe an exclamation mark with a circle. That's kind of a general warning icon. And then danger would be like a triangle, or maybe something more maybe, yeah, some other kind of icon to represent this is more critical than than the last two statuses. So I would
Okay.
be, color is a good way to help contextualize information, but it's only a part of a larger interface to help people understand. But I love these
Thanks.
questions, and if anybody has more, then keep it coming. And in conclusion, like you said in that last example, you want to demonstrate that the site knows its users and that it cares about them. So by using the language that the users know, and it doesn't have to be the general population language, as long as it's understood by the people using your software, if you can demonstrate that your software knows who its users are, and that we're going out of our way to make sure that those users know that they're cared for and are listened to, then that goes a long way in retaining that customer loyalty, or retaining that customer good impression. And so if you ever have any questions about how to replicate or how to represent something digitally, maybe try to find that real life counterpart and see how you can merge those two things together. Any other questions, or can I go over any slides again if there's anything I can clarify? All right. Well, thanks again
Awesome.
for listening to another UX Corner.
Just speaking of the colorblind, I'm colorblind apparently. And this is hotels.com. They used to have all of these icons. They're all blue now. They've changed them, but they used to be these two colors here. And for me, those are almost identical. Let me just make sure you zoom in. Nope, sorry, these two. I can't even tell. That red and that green. I can see. So if you are colorblind, you can basically have, I don't know, less rods or cones or something. And that's a red and that's a green. But at the normal zoom rate that we see on the screen, I can hardly discern those differences. So when you had this thing and you scrolled before, you couldn't actually tell which places were available. It was such a crummy experience to use that particular site for that reason. And like accessibility. I went to a conference in Amsterdam years ago, a ViewConf, and they had somebody talking about accessibility, and he was interviewing. He played a video where he's interviewing somebody who was blind, and they were using an app, and you could see how they interact with that stuff. And I was like, that's the first time I actually started to really appreciate why you want to make something accessible. We generally don't do that in our FileMaker community. It's not, it's, am I sharing my screen properly? I just want to make sure here. Yeah.
Yep.
It's not as much of a thing because most of the people who use our apps are employees and they just have to take it. But if you're building anything for the general public, you have to be considerate of that. Maybe we can have that might be actually a good Friday Live. We've done that in the past, but maybe a good segment. I want to bring up Linxue, and she's going to show a quick demo on touching and holding to emulate mobile devices.
Okay, so I'm going to share my phone first because I can only mock the show the long press and touch on my phone and cannot reproduce the same case on my desktop. Okay, here's my screen.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a little bit callback for the icon envelope. So this is an inbox for my emails page. And you can see I have a list of email. So generally, if I just tap, it will be the same with the click on the desktop. It will show the content from my email. And in our previous example, probably you will see in our demos and example, we have the swipe. It will show some options like read, flag, and archive, but it can be very noisy if we want to have more menu options. So that's why for some modern design apps, I learned this from Pearson. We can have the long press and hold, and that will open up another menu and show more options like mark read, mark flag, mute, or forwarding something else. It will be the similar mobile app on your iPhone. So so how can I enable this? I will show this on my desktop. Yes. Can you see my currently showing? Oh, okay. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
On my desktop?
Yep, looks
okay.
good.
Okay, great. So if you can see this snap X, snap mandatory, that's one the tailwind classes to show the swipe action. But here, unfortunately, they don't have any classes to mock the long press one. So I have those stuff here. So first, I want to talk about the context menu. This one is actually not the touch for the mobile phone, but it's actually the right click on your desktop. So let's see, on my desktop, if I right click here, I can see this context menu. But if I right click here, it will show my customized action right now. It will show the menu here.
Oh, that's interesting. So that is hijacking the default behavior.
Yes.
And you can just do that through that. I've always thought you had to add an event listener. Okay, that's cool. That's really valuable.
Okay, so the next part is the touch on my phone. I have a touch start, and also I set a long press timer, which is set timeout, set timeout and calling my BF named action select email. So this select email is actually passing the email I'm selecting, and also the model you show menu. Sorry, here, show email menu and set that is true. So you will see this menu. And at the I set the timer is 600. And when the touch end or touch cancel, I will clear the timeout for my model long press timer. And that's not enough. because by default, when you long press on your phone, it will try to select the text. So it's like when you try to copy text or so in this case, let me see. I have the little bit there. There's the select none. Also we have, yeah, we want to add this class as well. That will disable the select text when you long press on your mobile phone.
Oh, I see. So basically, if I'm understanding correct, you do a couple things. You first add context menu dot prevent. That prevents the event propagation. If you think of your web page or your web app as a stack of layers of things, and the very back you you can think of your main app or your window, and then the DOM is built up in front of that. The prevent stops that propagation of the actual JavaScript event from going deeper into the next layer. So the thing on top stops it from going down. So that's what that one does. And then while you're preventing that, you're running this select email. And then, so that's for the right click. And then for the touch, you start a timer there.
Yes.
But the key trick is to not select the text. And that's why you have the select none. Got it.
Yeah.
That's cool. You should show Michael this one. This is kind of neat, this right click stuff. This actually simplifies doing a right click. I'm just thinking for other apps that we use right click, we want to add a little pop-up context menu. I guess you could do the same thing with that, with just that alone. The event carries along positional information as well. So if you ever want to do something where you right click on a page and you show a special context menu, you could do that with the same technique, I guess. Awesome. Is that everything?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you for that. That's actually really, really, really cool tip, because I can think of a zillion places where we want to potentially use that. Just want to make sure, am I sharing the right screen here? I hope so. I want to just tell you about Vienna Calling. Been fortunate enough to go to a lot of these events, and made it a priority to go to these events as well, just to keep really current and from a networking aspect. Vienna Calling is a continuation of .fmp, and .fmp was like a European version of Pause on Air, and then they branched off and made it very, very much their own event. And last year was the last one that was held in Berlin, and this year another company has sponsored it, 72 Solutions. And they did an amazing job, the founders there of Vienna Calling, and continued that same sort of essence of what that conference is. So if you're ever curious about going to some of these, I can tell you the biggest difference between the European conferences and the American ones, or North American ones, I should say. First of all, they're a lot more free form in general. It seems like there's a lot of even Engage You seems it's a little bit more audience participation, more interactive in some ways. Engage You is a little bit slightly less, but Vienna Calling is very much like that. So I just got a couple quick videos. I won't bore you too much with these. Day one, they usually have some type of an event, and this is, let me see if I can go through here. This is just like a beer garden, so they carried on that same kind of tradition. So there's a whole bunch of people here. Not everybody went to that, so it's kind of a smaller group, but nonetheless, that was really, really good. One of the neat things about this particular conference is they had like a show and tell, and that was very impromptu. Giancarlo here is presenting a technique that he was using with VS Code. And he just decided at the very last minute that, hey, I'll just walk up, because they were looking for people from the audience and talk about techniques. And I think that's super valuable, because it doesn't matter what skill level a developer is. I think you have so much to offer in terms of ideas and new things that you've maybe discovered in your journey there. There was a an interesting. Okay, so I took this picture because this is the first triple Z I saw in the crowd here. Um, I don't know. And I was really kind of surprised because is this a video? No, it's not. Maybe it isn't. Anyway, I was really surprised because I thought we almost stopped doing that. Like I still don't get understand that one fully. So maybe one day somebody can explain why we need that anymore. All right, that's just to me it says bad naming conventions. I want to talk about some other quick slides here. This was kind of interesting. This is you can't really see much, but I'll tell you what it is. And I don't think I can zoom in too much. Can I? No. Using OData, you can actually the OData interface is kind of pseudo self-documenting, meaning that certain paths, and you might be able to see it a little bit here. Dollar metadata it says right in here. It's a little hard to see certain paths by hitting that OData endpoint from a browser, you can actually inspect or display some of the metadata of your database, and that's pretty powerful if you want to have a quick look. And it's really useful for external devices because they can inspect that as well and then understand what's going on inside the database. So that was kind of a cool trick that was presented there. There's some really neat things on using variables for external data sources. And the biggest takeaway is it's kind of tricky. You got to jump through some hoops. And if anybody's used variables in the past, it's something we looked at for the helper file because it would mean we could programmatically configure it from the editor. We could have a look into your database, find out what data files you have there, and then generate that external data source and then try to ping it. But we also found that it was kind of problematic and you have to shut all the files down every time you want to reset it and things. And there's some tricks around that, but that was kind of interesting. This is kind of an interesting visualization library that somebody presented. And there's some really, really cool libraries on the open source market that you can choose. If you do find anything really of interest that benefits our community, by all means, let us know. There was one really, really kind of scary or alarming presentation, and this was done by a developer. His name is Alexei, and he's from Ukraine, and he traveled. It took him, I don't know, something like 10 hours on a bus to get out of because all the flights, there's no fly zone and things like that. And by the time he got over to Vienna, so he put a lot of effort into to come and present this stuff. And he's a really brilliant guy. And he talked about FileMaker vulnerabilities, and you might have heard some of his stuff before, but he's basically found a number of vulnerabilities in FileMaker, and I think FileMaker's kind of quiet on them. I mean, who wouldn't be? But basically, the gist is, given just an IP address, he can hack any file. That's at the end of the day. So just given an IP address where your FileMaker server is, and you can go into Google and do a filtered search and find everything that has WebD in it, and then you can discover all of the FileMaker servers that have ever been indexed. Basically, everything is potentially open. You have to jump through some hoops. He didn't go into the exact details. If you're creative enough, there's enough information in the slides that you could probably figure some things out. But he talked about a few things. He talked about crashing servers, and he gave us some demos of that. And the main hack is in between when FileMaker client talks to FileMaker server, it requests and says, "Hey, what privileges do I have? What things do I have access of doing?" And some of those calls are not don't have great security on them. So at the end of the day, FileMaker databases are quite vulnerable. Some of this stuff has been patched, but he's found some other vulnerabilities as well. So he talks basically about how these last few versions and what the vulnerabilities are. And this site back here, CVE, is a site that tracks all of this stuff and all kinds of software. I'm just going to jump forward here. This is all just stuff on hacking again. Nicholas Franco, he leads up Bitwalk, which is a development dev house in Spain, in Madrid. and he just talked sort of about the state of AI. He gave a pretty good talk. Um, really interesting guy to talk with if you get an opportunity, or if you're interested in riffing on AI. He's probably one of the top ones. You know, there's the public AI people that promote stuff, and then there's another group of people that are pretty deep into things, and he's one of those guys. He's not super in the public eye, at least not in North America, but he's a really good one to if you ever get a chance to hear him speak. And our very own community, Jeroen, presented. He gave an awesome presentation talking about project management app that he's built. And he also promoted BetterForms as well in the process. I felt a little bit bad because he's doing such a great job of promotion. And so thank you for that. I think some people it was very convincing that we had quite a few people come up to us afterwards and ask us about his presentation and things. So he's a big shout out to his team, because you guys have built some amazing software. We've had him on Friday Lives before. Every time I see a demo for his stuff, it's like a notch higher. So really good shout out there. This is just outside. This is where the conference actually was. How can I get this thing to? It's weird that I can't select the. Oh, well, this is, I'm not going to play this here, at least. But this is just Clay Mackle and a whole bunch of developers. If you're out there, this is out in front of the Vienna, the place that we were there. So nonetheless, that was a big thing. Schnitzel was if last year's .fmp was all about beer, this year is all about the schnitzel, and there was a ton of that going around at some of the events. And then I will play this one here, and this was pretty funny. They played there we go. They played Vienna Calling, the song from Falco at the end there, and you could see people were kind of rocking out to it. It was pretty funny there. There's Yardis from Clickworks there, and so it was really, all in all, it was a really good conference. Again, if you get the opportunity to take part in these things, try do that. Don't just sit at home and say, "Oh, I'm just gonna hang out virtually." Go meet some people from our community. That's what makes FileMaker great that way. Alrighty, I want to talk about our main topic or presentation for today, and it's about just embedding apps and taking an app and sticking it inside another page and giving that page a ton of benefits there. So what is an embedded app? An embedded app is, just a second here, if I can pull up a new browser window. And let's go to here. We'll go to here. All right, so here is an example of an embedded app here. This is just our marketing page, but irrelevant. Doesn't really matter so much what the page is. And we've added this little icon at the bottom here. And we used a small snippet of code, really small snippet of code, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. And basically what that code does is that code launches a BetterForms app. So this app here from in here and here is inside an iframe. And that iframe is, and it can be any app, really, any app you want, but you want to have it give some kind of connectivity to your data. So we used an AI assistant, but I don't think that's always the most common thing. I think maybe just booking appointments, some type of advanced appointment booker. I know, for example, somebody in our community, Neil, I don't know if he's on the call today, but let me just pull up an example of where this would really fit in nice. Just a sec. Here it is here. So this would be a great app. Let me just, this is his demo here. There, this would be a great app that you could throw right inside one of these widgets as well. All right, whereas in this case, this is a public app that he has for booking, a client booking portal. And I can go through and I can get the most popular different types of event or different types of products that I want to book. And then I can continue. And I can pick various locations and providers there. And this is just development data, so there may not be actually anything on certain dates. And then I can go through and I can see what available dates they are. So that's a self-contained booking widget. So you could take some kind of a widget like that and throw that right inside this box. And now what's really cool about this is persistent as I navigate around. So if I navigate to another page here, I can see that stays on top. The reason it stays on top is because it's an iframe that's injected in. So let's have a look at how that works. And we've released a tech document. I got to clean it up a little bit, but I will put it on, make it public. It is public now, but I'll make it available, the link available. And basically the gist is you can take any app as long as your app is going to be able to fit within the constraints of the space that you want. The one that I built here, I made this one responsive. So as I go smaller and smaller and smaller, suddenly the chat window takes up full size. We get rid of that icon at the bottom. And then if I close that, I still have the icon there. So it's a pretty decent experience. It's just whipped up really quick as an example, but you can see that it works pretty good. All right, so you can basically embed any type of app, whether it's a chatbot. I use a chatbot, and we're going to talk about how that chatbot itself works. Customer support related things, calculators, financial calculators, or anything that's related to your data, anything that you want that is contextual to your data and towards, of course, the site. So here's how it works basically, is you take a small snippet of code, and the snippet looks about like this one here. My snippet happens to be a bit bigger. That's what she said. And in that snippet, and the reason mine is a little bit more is because I have a bunch of other little things. I have some stuff where the close button can communicate to the parent, and there's a little bit of additional styling, and it's also responsive as well. So I didn't write this code. I just went to GPT and I basically said, here's my link, my URL to my app, embed it, iterated a couple times, and it produced this. But we can have a quick look at how it works really, really quickly here. At the very top, there is a URL that's broken out. That would be the URL to your app. And then this is kind of neat. Some of you might be, if you're more familiar with JavaScript, you've seen this. This is called an IIF. It's an embedded interlink. Anyway, it's basically a self-running function. And the idea here is that you'll see a lot of snippets that have this kind of thing. This starts off with this arrow function. We don't really need to know how any of that works, but at the very end, it invokes itself. And the reason snippets do this is more of an advanced thing. The reason snippets do this is it isolates the context of the snippet itself from the page. So that means any variables you declare in here don't show up in the page's environment, the parent page, because you don't know if you're writing a snippet that's going to go in one of your customers' pages. For example, I have a bunch of customers that have flower shops, for example. I see Mark in the call here. We don't know what variables their particular website is using, so we want to isolate that. So this is a common trick that's used by doing that, by isolating there. It's basically putting the code inside a function and then running that function, and that gives you separation. It basically establishes an iframe, and here's the iframe here. And then inside the iframe, it creates my app. So it loads my app into that iframe, and it hides the iframe. And then there's a button at the very bottom, and there's some styling that's in the button, right? Mobile test replace display right in here. And where are we else here? Right here. So in this bottom button, it's actually drawing an SVG. So that way I don't have any external dependencies in this particular case. And there's a little bit of a crossfade on there. So that's why it's bigger. If you wanted to edit this, it's really, really easy. Just take it, put it into GPT, say, hey, this is the changes I want to make. I want to put it in the bottom right corner, the bottom left corner. I want it to stay persistent. I want it to, when they close, maybe put a close box or things like that. Actually, I'm using Notion here, and they have one there too. That's probably built right into their app. So that is the way the snippet itself works. So it's pretty simple. It does do something kind of interesting. So when you put something into an iframe, the iframe can't easily talk to the parent, and that's done for security. Otherwise, you could put, hey, here's a free widget that you can put on everybody's site, and then everybody goes and visits that site. And if the iframe could talk to the parent and see the stuff in the parent's page, that would be a massive security vulnerability, because suddenly, thousands of people are using your widget. So you have to have a mechanism for this little chat window, this app, to be able to close. I gave this to Pearson. He said, well, you can close it by here, but it's not intuitive. Can you put an X in the top? And it's like, frick, he wants me to put an X in the top. It's like, I got to figure out how to do that. So what's happening here is you can communicate between two browser windows, between two apps on the same browser platform, with something called window messaging. This is not BetterForms messaging. It's a little different. And window messaging, basically, I can send a message from here to the parent, which is right here, and I can tell it to close. So this is, when I click this, and we'll look at the code in a second, that's just sending a message to the top, and that's closing there. Now, why you want to do that is that message that you send to the top doesn't necessarily have to be something closed. If you have a WordPress site, maybe it's sending something from your widget to the WordPress app that it's sitting in, that it's embedded in. Maybe and that WordPress app might be returning some other information, like authentication. That comes up a lot in our support. Like, how do I pass information from the parent to the child between my WordPress site or whatever it is and my actual site? This could just as well be a shopping cart in here, right? You could put a shopping cart in here, and now you've added a shopping cart to virtually any app, right? If I never thought about that, but you could basically take any page, and if you had a small button on the page that says add to cart, and all it has to do is invoke or send a message back down into this app, now you have this shopping cart effect as well. So you really can build virtually anything you want in here. Any questions about that so far? Alexi, one of the good guys. Yeah, Alexi is one of the good guys. Sorry, I'm just catching up on some of these notes. It's glad that he didn't just get bitter towards the community, and like some people have, and just said, here's how to hack every database. All right, so that's generally what what these embedded widgets are. You probably have different ideas. These are some ideas that I came up with, but I'd love to hear about some other ideas that and if it has some merit, we'll definitely make an example for it as well, because I think it's pretty powerful technique, right? This reference doc is available in our engineering reference docs. I think there's a link to we've moved most of these into our actual main docs, but I think there's a link that goes back as well. If not, we'll push this one in over the next couple days. You can also take the code. I didn't demonstrate it, but you can take that code, you can minify it here, and once you've minified it, let me just see if this one here, yeah. So if I copied this minified code, I can go to pretty much any site and paste it in. So if we I'll use Mark's site. All right. So let's say here's a site here, and I wanted to paste this into the page just as a test. I'm going to take that chunk of minified code, I pop it in, and done. There it is. And so you can test that out. If you want to show it to your client, say, hey, we can put this chat widget into your app. Here's how you do it without even modifying their page. And it looks like it grew there, right? I think that's pretty cool. Again, any app you want in there. All right. So that's the concept of embedded apps. I want to talk about a couple new APIs and services that we have, and some changes, a little bit of changes to our docs as well. So let me pull that up. So we've just recently, you'll see a lot of automated posts every time we update the docs. It goes into our Slack group, and we're trying to refine these. We appreciate the people who have given us like pull requests and issues and pointed that stuff out. We don't ignore them; they get worked in there. So we updates the stuff accordingly. So thank you for that. The BetterForms streaming proxy is basically an interface that sits within our cloud infrastructure that allows you to do streaming. Streaming is kind of tricky to do in general. It requires some middleware, and typically streaming is done usually over a WebSocket. It's a protocol that's that browsers can use to communicate to the server. There's a number of different protocols, maybe 4 or so that are common. And our streaming proxy uses WebSockets. One of the neat things about WebSockets is it's a semi sort of persistent connection between the cloud and the browser. They periodically ping each other, but they can send information. So that means it's not waiting for another technique. Was an older technique is what's called long polling. That's when you make a request and it just doesn't return the request until it has information. And then when it does, it sends the information and then you make another request again and you wait. This one is a little bit more proactive. It can send or push information in either direction. And that's really handy for streaming. We use that for messaging, and BetterForms uses it for your hooks and everything as well. But it's really, really handy for streaming. So we've come up with 3 streaming APIs, and they serve different purposes. The first one will be deprecated because it doesn't have as much need as the industry changes. But I just want to tell you about them in case you want to build some stuff here. You can't do native streaming arguably in FileMaker directly. So what that means is you want to stream some stuff. They've just added into the ETS release the ability to do streaming, but you can only stream back into a FileMaker app and run a script effectively as the stream stuff comes in. The BetterForms streaming works a little bit differently than that, and I'm going to grab an example of that right here. And let me just first of all, let me just tell you what streaming allows you to do. So give me just a second here. I think test. Just want to make sure this is still. We didn't get any. There we go. All right. So you saw how that automatically scrolled up here. What can you do? Right. So what's happening here is when I send a message, I'm initiating a stream from FileMaker. So I'm basically sending a hook into FileMaker, into my FileMaker app. I have an example app. And in that example app, we are initiating a stream. And we're basically saying, this is the ID of the device that's requesting this stream, because I'm not authenticated here. But in BetterForms, every tab has its own unique client ID, its connection. And I'm saying to our LLM, in this case, I'm using OpenAI, I'm saying to OpenAI, can you stream back some information from here, from you? And then I want it to go back directly into here. And we'll look at how that works in just a sec. And then on this side over here, we are, as we receive those bits of streaming chunks, we're basically appending them onto a longer string, and that string is effectively rendered as Markdown and HTML. So, for example, we can build by taking advantage of these streams. We can build things like chat assistants. This one here, I'm just going to turn off just a second here. I'm just going to turn off the default data here because I had some development data that's in here. So it's kind of annoying a little bit, but give me just a second. We'll just turn that off really quick. And here, see what I'm doing. So it's no secrets. Okay. And data model. And I'm just going to turn that off. Right. Okay. Cool. So there's my stream, and I should actually turn off the dev tools right from here as well, because those are sort of in the way right now. This one, yeah. Okay, so just refresh that. Okay. All right, so here's my chat assistant. So I can now do things like what we've done is, just for this example, is we connected it up last night to our docs. So I can say things like, what is the default password for the helper file as an example. And then what the AI is going to do, and we'll show you how this time provided will show you how this works on the back end. It's going to search the documentation, and the default password for the BetterForms helper file is BetterForms, all lowercase. For sure, that's wrong. Are you sure? It was connected, so hopefully it didn't break something here. And by giving it access to Eduardo, if you're on the call, if you could have a quick look and just check to see if that, oh, there it goes. So here's an interesting thing. So this could be prompted out. So this is kind of interesting. This is non-deterministic behavior. I asked what the default password was, and it put better.
In this case, you have a little less control over when it's using.
Right. So let's talk about what's happening here as part of the big picture. And it gave me some links. I haven't formatted these links. We should tell it to do that as well. And but it did give me the username and admin. Now I got that data from our docs, so it's gone over to our documentation and it's looked up in here and it's found that information there. Okay. So how does that work? All right. So we have our device here and we have our BetterForms app sitting there. And that app is connected just like any other app. It has a hook and it has an endpoint that is processing the hook. And when I hit enter, it's sending the message array back to my FileMaker server. So we're back over here through the hook. My FileMaker server is processing that script and it is fetching my default prompt. And it's grabbing my API key and it's calling the BetterForms streaming service. So that's this one right here. Now we could call OpenAI directly, and we could even use the built-in in the newest versions of FileMaker. It has, I think, something like get generative results or something like that, a new instruction step. And you could get the data back, but it wouldn't be streaming. Right. And then I would have to take that data and I could send it back to here. So I just see the stuff instantly. That's not a problem if the stuff that you're returning is short. But if you remember what the AI assistant was maybe 2 years ago before we added streaming, you'd have to sit and wait. And it's like, is it going to return? And sometimes it could take a minute or 2 minutes because, it was really slow. So in this case, it's OpenAI is returning the data. And then our streaming API is saying, oh, you wanted to send that to a tab directly, not come back into FileMaker. We can bring it back into here, but you may as well just call them directly then. And it's returning that through our messaging system all the way back into the browser. Right now, so it looks kind of complex, but it's actually pretty simple. And let's have a look at the actual demo here. And before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the different types of endpoints that we have. So there's 3 endpoints. If you're familiar with OpenAI, and I'll use them as an example because that's where we started. The first 2 are OpenAI only, and the last one supports OpenAI, Anthropic, and Gemini. The second 2 are in beta, so they're not going to change too much, but there might be some glitches or something like that, some issues. So the first one, the streaming API, is basically chat completions. If you're familiar with OpenAI's APIs, it's just a chat completions. That chat completions is used less in favor for assistants, and then later on they've changed it to Edward, do you know the name? After assistants, it's called sessions or something, or there's a subtle name for it. Anyway, it's a version 2 of the assistants, and that's what we're connecting to. So this first one, and I'm going to use the one I'm using today. This is this one here. So basically, this is how you connect to the API. You have an endpoint. It's whatever your app is, /stream/create/assistants. And you do a post from there. So an insert from URL from FileMaker. You're going to pass an API key. The channels are the BetterForms channels that you want to connect to. You say, well, where do I get that from? within our helper file here. I'm just going to open up my helper. And you didn't see that. All right. And we look at a given communication from the helper file, and we can see that in our state, actually it's params here. In our state object here, we have something called a client ID. And that is the unique connection to that particular tab in that person's browser. It's a unique ID. So we just add that as the channel. BetterForms has arbitrary channels. We've talked about messaging in the past, and there's the docs. There's quite a bit of documentation on the messaging as well. If I want to run an action, basically when that stream data comes in, I just say I want to run a specific action. I have an action in my app called stream receive data, something like that. It's called assistant receive stream results, right? So this action gets run from that message that comes back from OpenAI. Okay. And I configure that, and the payload is the data that we're going to pass to OpenAI. So that's things like what model you're going to use, what the seed is, what the token limit is, and things like that. And there's some details down here in the payload object as well. And here's an example request. So if you're trying to build this up yourself, but the helper file, our example file has all of this information in here. So let's look at what happens. So I hit enter on the front end. We're going to go back to our chat example here. And right in here, I have, oops, sorry, I clicked on the report a bug. Right in here, I have the chat field, and it's listening for the enter key. When the enter key gets pressed, we run a named action called assistant prompt enter. It looks like there's quite a bit of stuff, but we'll go through it quick. This first one is basically building up a little bit of stuff because it's because we have to format the data a little bit for these frontier models. Well, virtually every model requires the data to be formatted a little bit. We're doing some formatting here. We're getting rid of the fact that we could have an empty message. And if somebody hit the shift or the control key, like to do a forced enter, we're filtering that out. We are grabbing any files that the user might have attached, and we're putting those into part of that stream. So we're sending the file data along. And then finally, we are we're putting it all into the latest message array, and we're sending that. So that's happening in there. The second one is, this is a separate named action called prompt resize. And the reason for that is I might do something like this, and you notice that text box is going bigger. So it's just automatically scaling it. When I hit enter, it's scaling that box up and down. That's what that second step is doing. By default, the browser doesn't do this automatically, although there is a new Chrome ability to do that. So that's coming out eventually. I'm scrolling to the bottom of the page. So that means as soon as I hit enter, I'm over here and I hit enter, I want that to scroll all the way to the bottom. So that's what's happening there. And then what's happening in this one here? Let me just have a quick look. We're doing a little bit more. We're adding a scroll listener. This is something that we just added into, I don't think it's in production yet, but you notice when the stuff is scrolling, you want to be able to interrupt the scroll. That's kind of tricky because it keeps feeding more data. So this is basically saying that if the screen has been scrolled, don't auto scroll, right? So when I hit enter here, it's going to scroll up, but then if I scroll down, it's streaming right now, but it's not going to blow away the stuff that I'm trying to read because, you know, AI babbles quite a bit, right? Okay. So that's what that's doing. And then finally, it's running a utility hook. Okay, so that's that part. Now, this example is available, by the way. We're going to convert it into two examples, one for an embedded widget within FileMaker and one for one that sits as a separate external app. And we have released that. I would hold off on using it until Give it a week and two so we work the bugs out, because I just published this yesterday. It is AI widget here. So you can grab this and use this exact app, this exact template right now. Okay. And let's have a look at how that call works over on FileMaker here. Okay. Demo workspace. Oops, sorry, I got the wrong app here. Just a second, guys. Examples. Here we go. We just pushed out an update to the example file. It doesn't have this code in it. I'll push that out over the weekend. So we're going to go into our script workspace, and there is an example called template chat, and that is the one that this chat is using. I do have a preferences. I don't want to jump to that screen. Let me just make sure it's visible. I just don't want to expose my stuff, because then we got to go and find everything. All right, close enough. And so in my preferences table, this is fine. In my preferences table, you can, we have an API, some API key information and so on. You can't really see anything there, so we're safe, I think. And in my template chat folder, I have a scoped hook set for the web chat, and we're not using any on-form request, but we do have an on-utility. So in my on-utility, I've broken this down into a subscript. Some people put their code in here. I prefer not to, because I know that it's not going to be as extensible or maintainable. So the type is chat enter. It's running this subscript. Let's have a look at that script. And here's my whole script. That's actually the whole thing here. So let's have a look at what's happening. We're grabbing the messages that come in. They come in from the hook. I'm grabbing the new message. That's the latest one. And I'm grabbing the... Incidentally, did you know you could do this? This is a new feature in 20-ish, something like that, 21, FileMaker 21, that you can say the last item in an array. And I think there's one for the first item. Well, 0 would be the first one anyway. And you can just fetch that easily. I think that's kind of cool, because you used to have to get a value count and then figure it out from there. Getting a thread ID. I'll talk about what the threads are, but you can think of a thread like a persistent session. So maybe you wanted to have a persistent session with that user and keep that that session isolated to itself, so that the LLM can base information on the past without having to send all the messages. The domain is important. I'm grabbing that out of the state, because we could have a production domain and a development domain. So I grabbed that out of there as well. The client ID is connected to the action. So I'm grabbing, that's the client ID. I thought I grabbed that here. Yeah, that's the unique address for that person. So I'm grabbing just this stuff. You could put this in one command if you wanted to. Then I have a little bit of stuff for a dynamic template. And I gave a quick talk about this in Vienna. You really need, if you were doing any kind of significant AI work, you need a method for managing your prompts and your connections and all of that stuff. And I used a very, very simple method here. We've talked about this technique before, but it's a generic data store. It's just a table that has a key. The key is the owner, and the data is the data. So it's a key value pair. And I created a one where the key is called assistant template web chat. So it's kind of namespaced. And then there's a prompt in here, right? And the prompt basically says you're an AI bot and you have access to this and so on. And some things it says about here might say a bit about the searching the documents and things, but we could have it, we could say, don't say anything about this. Make sure you do that. We could add some prompting guardrails, I should say, onto it, and we can control it a little bit more. So this is just fetching that prompt there. So I fetched the template name. I've hard coded the template name, because that's always going to come from that website in this case. If you're building an AI assistant into a FileMaker or any other app, you may want to have the template that you're using for that assistant be contextual to where you are in the app. And then we're using a get column to fetch that data. So now I have the template. Process the template. So I think I might have talked about this in a past Friday Live. We have a custom function, and there's a repository for this. It's called Git. Sorry. This mustache here. Where's the template repository? Mustache. All right, it's called FM Mustache Template Processor, and it is it's just a custom function, and it allows you to dynamically merge contextual environmental data from FileMaker, including evaluations, directly into a template. So that means you could take a template like this, and let me just do this so you can see. If I wanted to say something like, here, just a sec. I could say the user's name is, and then you put these mustaches in here. And if in the script it has access to those variables, so it could the username, right? I could say something like that, and then it'll dynamically merge that in. You could use this for like email merges and stuff like this as well. But you can also do more advanced stuff. You could use formulas. You say get column as array and fetch a bunch of data, or get column, or whatever you wanted to do. You can do conditionals as well. So you can say if the user is a developer, give them this prompt, and so on. So you can extend that quite a bit. Okay. Any questions about that at all? And Michael said, and a plus to add an item. So that's to concatenate. That's a good tip there too. Let me just go back to that because it's really good. Thank you, Michael. Where is it here? If you wanted to add an item onto the end of an array, you can just put a plus in here, and then it'll concatenate onto the last item. So you don't have to figure out the length and then set the next one and so on, right? Which is a real pain. All right, so after we got the template and after we merged, I'm not merging anything, but I added it in as an example. We are setting that template as message 0 in the prompt, right? Because if you look at my existing prompt, we actually have a default, let me just do this. We have a default message in here, and I don't need to pass that to the LLM. So I just replace this with the other message. Depending on the LLM that you're using, you may or may not have access to a system prompt. A system prompt is like, it's like it's like a higher level of prompt. It's supposed to be anyway. It turns out that most LLMs don't pay too much attention to them, but they're basically underlying guidelines that prompt is not directly exposed to the user. And that's the one where you give it your AI assistant its flavor and its personality. So I'm sticking that into prompt to message 0, and then I do a few other things. I configure the model in assistant. So I'm grabbing our assistant ID. This is the ID of the AI assistant. This is in OpenAI's playground. So this is set up over here. And yeah. All right, and we jump into assistants here, and we can create a new assistant, and these are some of our assistants that we have, and I believe this one is called, it's got the word demo or something in it. Chat demo, there it is. All right, so this is the assistant that it's connecting to, and there's the CFE, yeah, that's the right one. So this is the configuration of the assistant. So what can you configure here? Well, first of all, we can add a bunch of files. And in this case, we got about 2 megabytes of files. Those files, for the example, are all of our docs in GitHub, in Gitbook, all of our docs, plus we've scraped our forum and all of the data in the forum, and we added those in. Okay, so that's what these docs are here. And we've enabled one of the built-in tools called file search. So file search is a built-in tool that the AI can have access to. if we wanted to do something like code interpretation, where it writes a little bit of code to calculate something out, we could actually just literally just turn that on. And when it needs to, it'll write some code, evaluate the code, and then return the result to us. So if you had to give it some more complex tasks, you could do that. And we've also defined, I've only defined one function here for this example, and it's called find people. Functions, and maybe I think this might even be better to save for a different Friday Live if you're interested in function calling and tool use more. But basically, we said you have a function, and the way these functions work, they're not really real functions. They're not real code. They're a definition of code or a schema of the function and how to call it. So I created an example one. It says find people. It says searches the people table by various arguments used when looking for people. This uses FileMaker to search. So as to search, so you can also do things like ranges. Okay, so I told it that's a FileMaker type search. So you can add a range, searches for people in that age range. And then we say what arguments that we want to send. And in my case, we're sending the first name starts with, the last name starts with, these are some strings, an age and an option, and give it a little bit of background information, male, female, an email address, and what is this one? Primary key of the person. So it can search by a bunch of different things. I'll show you how that works in a second. That's how you configure an assistant, right? So now it has a bit of agency. You know, there's a lot of talk. I keep hearing people sort of say what they think an agent is. Oh, this is an agent. That's not an agent. Agent comes from agency, and that means it can do something. It can do anything. If your AI can do something other than just talk to you, then it's an agent, right? You can argue on that one. All right. So by giving it some tool use, we give it some agency. In this case, I have the temperature. That's the amount of determinism, if you will. It's turned all the way down. Top P is turned up. These vary by model. You can pass this data in into the APIs as well. And finally, I've got the payload. I build up my payload here. That's pretty straightforward. And here's an example in here. And I'm calling one other smaller connector, and this is just a connector. I don't know if you design your APIs like this, but I treat an API as in 3 layers. The very bottom layer is the substrate or the protocol that you're communicating with. Usually it's an HTTP request. So we have a bottom layer script called HTTP request. It's a pretty common one. Then the next layer up is the connector for that specific, not use case, but that specific service. Okay, the specific service. The service meaning I'm connecting to the BetterForms API. I'm connecting to SendGrid, right? So that's that layer. That has no opinion as to what the use case is. It's just connecting to that one endpoint. Then finally, the use case specific ones. That's the stuff that we're adding the real data on top. This way, by building things in 3 layers, you can have a whole bunch of different parts of your app reuse the same connector. And if you ever have to change something, you're only changing one layer. You want to swap out SendGrid for MailChimp or something like that. You can do that relatively easily by abstracting the data into the right spots. Okay, so this one here, all it's doing is it's just parceling it up and putting it into an HTTP request. All right, you can take that apart. I won't go through that. And that's it. That's the only code that's building out this AI agent. There is one other thing that's happening in behind the scenes. We are doing a function call. I'll just show you quickly how the function call works. When we do have to make a function call or a tool use call, last month I talked about MCP and a bunch of things related to tool use in AI. If you want your AI agent to be able to call some tools, and I think I've heard some people critique what FileMaker is doing, but actually I don't think it's too bad. They're giving you the ability to basically expose scripts as function calls. We built this API a while ago, way before that, and so we're calling a function call slightly differently, and I'll show you how that works. Basically, the way the streaming proxies work, and all 3 of these I think can do function calls. The way they work is they do a callback to your helper file as an API call. So it comes the data, just a second here, helper. The call that comes from the LLM to when it needs to use a tool is coming back and it's showing up in here. We have a new script handler that sits in here. Let me just make this a bit bigger again, sorry. And I'm going to go into my common hook sets, and it's called, just like you have on API call, this one's called AI assistant call. And this is called anytime the AI needs to make a callback. And this is it's coming from our data center, from the OpenAI through the data center into here. So this is really simple. And in this particular case, it's doing a perform script by name, and it's appending assistant function. Never have to touch this again. And all you have to do every time you want to add a function on, you just, let's see, what do they call the system function? So I got to find them in here. So here's a bunch of functions that are in here, and here's the find people function. It's pretty straightforward. You're getting arguments. I'm going into find mode. I am perform find, let's see. I am setting all of those variables in there for the find. I'm grabbing the data. I am truncating it off to the first 21. The purists will hate seeing a big number like this for omit. I don't can't be bothered to do the calculation properly. I'm passing that, I'm grabbing all those people, I'm getting them as an array. This is a common technique to convert a found set into an array. We can do that now easier, but we never used to be able to. And I'm adding, this is kind of important, not really important, but a kind of a power trick is I'm adding some additional instructions. And in my additional instructions that I'm returning to the LLM, I'm saying I'm returning this many records, and found results are a logical AND of the supplied arguments. If you need an OR, perform them separately. So I'm basically saying to the LLM, without buggering up all of the function call and all that stuff, hey, I found a bunch of stuff, and if you need to change it, this is how you're going to have to handle it, or have to change it. That returns it in a response, and it goes back out to the LLM. So what that allows you to do is, hopefully this works, is I say, how many people are 40 years old? And what it's going to do now is it's going to do a function call to FileMaker. This is from my public website, right? And I should be doing a function call to FileMaker. We should see that over here. There are 9 people who are 40 years old in the current data set. All right, we could change the wording, of course. And let's have a look at how that worked. So here's my chat enter. That's the message when I hit enter. How many people, where is it here? Sorry, how many people are 40 years of age? And then finally to that last record, last record here, assistant call. This is the call that came in from the AI. It said, run the find people. Age is 40. It gave me some other information, metadata. If you want to build advanced agents and stuff, we can do that with this. And here's the tab information as well, the channels. And then that did it perform the search? And then here's the response. Here's the response data that it returned. Okay, what are the names? So you can imagine that you could build now something that people want to say, what's my outstanding balance? Now, what's really cool here, depending on how you want to word this, you don't need authentication. The function itself can ask for the authentication, and then therefore the LLM will need the authentication. For example, if I had something like get invoice, and you need an invoice number and you need a date. Let's say you need an invoice number and a date. That's not really great authentication, but maybe it's a person's last 4 digits of their phone number. You set those as the input argument for the function. So you say, give me the invoice number and the last 4 digits of your phone number. The AI knows that the function needs to have that information. So it's going to ask you here, can you please tell me this information? Right? But if I was to just say get invoice such and such, my get invoice 123, last 4 digits are 5555, enter, it already has the information. It won't ask you, and it can do the call. So you can still surface secure information without the user logging in. just by the fact that the thread can ask you those important pieces of information. And it's really, really easy to do. All you have to do is create a function similar to these. Here's a few other ones I've already created. I haven't surfaced them in this. I've demonstrated these before. This one's called get person. It just returns a person object. When we pass the ID of the object, just the ID, so it already has to know the ID. So you use find people first, and then you would use get person second. Find products, that's for searching for products. Get invoice, get web page content. That's a simple scraper that's just doing an insert from URL from the web page that it passes and passing the data back. Very simple. And this is kind of a cool one. It's a database CRUD. So you could call this and say, update my last name or update my address to 555 Main Street. And it could do that. Do that as well, just by calling this routine. You wouldn't leave this open like this, of course, in a public app. You'd have to have some security around it, like I just mentioned, but that's kind of the gist. All right, that is pretty much it for using this streaming API. The differences, just again to recap, we have 3 different endpoints. This is the chat completions. This is the assistance endpoint. The assistance one has access to files and docs. The completions one does not. If you're familiar with OpenAI, this is the equivalent of going in and creating a new project and adding files in. It's almost the same thing, right? This is the one you probably want to use for the most part. The newest one, which is what our AI assistant is using, is the LLM query. Now, the difference between this one and the other one is they're almost the same. This is not using assistance because assistance is something that OpenAI has, but Google or Anthropic and Gemini do not. So we have to have something that's consistent. So this has the same interface for function calls. You can define the functions, pass them in. It has the same interface for all 3 providers, even though they're different, it remaps them properly. And you can switch providers on the fly. So now you can build some kind of AI tool and switch the providers and use all the same functional arguments and everything like that. It's reasonably, it's AI documented, so it's got a lot of babble in here, I'm not going to lie. But all the information that you would need is in here. And there's actually some information on how it works a little bit in here as well. This one is just released, so it's not, well, it's been out for a few months, but it's in beta right now, and we're making little changes as we see issues, but we're the only ones who are using it. But like we always build stuff for ourselves and let everybody else preview it or test it out for everybody else. This one here is a little bit more popular and it's being used there, and then the chat API. So I hope that gives you a little bit more background on building a few things: embedded apps, chat type widgets, function calling. Covered a lot of stuff: function calling, prompt management, model differences, a whole bunch of things in there. Either that, or if maybe you fall asleep, I don't know. It's a lot of crickets out there today, so right. Sorry if I went too deep into stuff or not deep enough. Let me know. Any questions about any of these things here? And Mike, are you still on here? Mike Wallace? Are you still in? Maybe not.
Mike is here. He's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
What's up?
I was going to say, one of the things you can do here with this one is one of the things we've done is that same function calling. We have another tool called call subagent, and that just calls the subagent from there. What we've done though, which is kind of neat, is you can talk directly to the subagent, or you can talk to just a high-level agent.
Right. So how do you pick which agent that you're going to talk to in the chat?
You can. It'll call the subagent, and then the subagent passes it off. It says, "Hey, I'm done." And that subagent can be blocking or non-blocking as well. So that subagent can be autonomous and they can go off on their own. Let me find an example of
Explain
that.
what do you mean by blocking or non-blocking?
Yeah. So let's say I have an agent that's going to send an email. And it just sends, it composes and sends an email. It doesn't ask me to proof it.
Right.
Okay? The top level agent can be the, we'll call it the customer service rep. And it says, oh, I need to send John an email.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it talks to the sub-agent, says, send an email to John, review all of the case, check out the things, include this, include that, do all of these other things. Sub-agent says, got it. And it doesn't come back again, and it just runs it. So there's no resolution.
Yeah,
Right?
perform script on a server without
Bingo.
waiting.
Bingo. Right. Exactly the same idea. Whereas the other one, we might want to wait for it to come back and say, can you confirm that that was done properly? And they go back and forth. So it's sort of, this is kind of a rough drawing, but it sort of looks like this, where you come in, you have some type of agent, you call a sub-agent that has access to different tools, and that says, I'm done, back to the top agent again.
Right.
Right. So
yeah, I don't have that in my demo. That's a good idea to be able to release the sub-agents to go do something, you know.
Yeah, and then it just gives it returns a result anyway, but it returns, this result comes sort of right away here. And it says, this task has been passed off to the sub-agent. And the parent one says, okay, I guess I got it. And it continues on. What we're finding now, though, with these sub-agents is that you don't really need it as much because the top level agents can follow instruction. And we really only needed it in the past for following instructions. So we're doing more experiments where we dynamically change the prompting for this top level agent as it goes along. We give it new personalities, and it's the same thread going along here. So that's something.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is that the number of tools that you are using, that's one reason to break it into sub-agents. So if you have a whole lot of tools, it's better to have a sub-agent with a group of tools.
Or you dynamically assign those tools, and this is why we do that now. So we actually have the ability to pick and choose the tools that an agent can use dynamically. So the prompts change
when you make the prompt,
tools
you
change
choose which
dynamically.
tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on the context of what you're doing, right? Like, for example, if we're building an app here, we may not want to give it anything more than some very basic tools, maybe access to a calendar or something like that. But that same agent, maybe if they've authenticated or if they've done something else, we may want to give it some more tools so we can dynamically change that stuff, sort of. But it's outside of this realm, but it's definitely, if you want to chat about that, it's kind of more interesting in some ways.
I mean, I guess the main difference would be your keeping a continual thread. So in other words, like if you're keep changing out the prompt and changing out your tool choices, things like that, then you have one thread of history. Whereas if you have a sub agent, then that breaks into a sub thread, and you're only getting back the response from that agent.
So here's an example of that in real life. If I open up this assistant here, looks like the same one, but if I open up this assistant here, it has prompting for this page. But the minute I change to this tab here, we create a separate thread, but the same history, right? Separate thread, but the same history of the data. So in other words, we're starting a new, there's new context and there's new template prompting around that. Right. So by doing that, we can dial it in for this one here.
Right.
But it still has the same history. So when you
you're passing the full history, so it has its full context of everything you have.
Yeah. So and we're finding that works out not too bad, because you can go back over to here and say, hey, add some data for here, and now do this again, and it still understands that it added data over there. There's some other techniques that are not in here that make that even better, that we're sort of discovering, where we basically tell the user or tell the AI, you've just changed modes, now you're this person. And we're moving that prompt, instead of being at the beginning, we're moving it further up.
Are you also I wasn't going to ask. Are you doing like history summary at some point if it starts getting
No,
long?
not finding or needing that. And especially with the like Gemini's like that's a mega token, a megapint.
Right. Okay.
It's getting longer. The context is getting longer, so we haven't bothered to do like a reduction
Okay.
there, and haven't really fully. And we send quite a few tokens. You know, we're like
Right.
we're there's anywhere between 5 and 10,000 tokens that can go in a typical thing, pretty high. But that still gives enough headroom that it's not too bad.
Very cool.
Any other questions before we wrap up this? If you can think of some ways you can use widgets, please do let us know, because we always find that we introduce something that's interesting, but sometimes it takes too long before it gets, we're just seeing people build PWA apps. We're just seeing, people using, well, not even so much using streaming yet. So we always see slow adoption, but we'd like to see a little quicker. So let us know how we can do that. All right.
One thing that you
I am
showed
going
that
yeah.
You had the interrupt on the scroll, so that if you scrolled up to read something, it wouldn't keep snapping back down to the bottom. Adding that to your agent in the app would be really nice.
It's in the next version. It
Okay.
just hasn't been deployed yet.
Very cool.
So that'll probably come out in another week or so. We were going to deploy it to yesterday, but there's some other things, some stuff. And actually, it'd be good to interview you guys. So I'll do that after we finish up. But just some new UI. Maybe Hassan, if you want to demo the save those changes, just to get some feedback at the end. We'll do it after we finish up here.
Yeah. I have a hard stop at 11 for the Claris AI stuff. But
gotcha.
I can set an appointment to meet with you all if you'd like.
All good. Thank you. I'm just going to stop our recording here, and if I can find it. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next month. We're going to have our draw right now.